Akbar, lovely to see you. You and I go back to the 1950s, 60s. We were all young kids once, young people. And
You're still young.
and our fathers were very close friends. And then you became one of my father's favorite young friends, you and Suleiman. He just loved the two of you, enjoyed talking to you both, got a lot out of it. And so there are a lot of lovely memories, happy memories. 1960s, Abba and Uncle Noman were always discussing politics, and they were all such passionate people, very hopeful, and the country was still doing well despite the problems. It's never been problem free, but no country is problem free.
Yeah.
But one never thought we'd land where we had. You were after Oxford, and you went off to IMF.
Yeah.
And how long were you in IMF?
About 3.5 years, 4 years.
Uh-huh. And then?
And I went to the World Bank, and I was at the World Bank for donkey years, 25 to 30 years. But then I always took time off from the bank. First I was with ILO in Bangkok, and then I took time off to come and work for the government of Pakistan.
Achha.
After Benazir became Prime Minister, she was very kind. She invited me and appointed me to various things without me agreeing to it, without asking me. And technically I could not have served in those positions as a World Bank employee. The World Bank, but anyway, very exciting time when she was elected Prime Minister. Young person, bit like us, the kind of person we sit in the drawing room with and so on, talk to unlike many politicians. But Sarsaj Aziz through Moin Afzal played, I believe, an important role in getting me the offer of economic advisor to the Minister of Finance, and that I served there for about 3 years. My last day was the last day of Moin Qureshi. So I served through the Moin Qureshi government, and there was a period when there was enormous changes in government. As you know, very frequent changes in that period. Benazir and Nawaz and actually the caretaker governments in between, and various finance ministers of various kinds. So that was a fascinating time.
Yeah.
I learned a lot.
And I'm very privileged to go through so many experiences.
Yeah.
Huh?
I went back to the World Bank, and I worked very closely with Joe Stiglitz, who was then the chief economist of the World Bank. And Joe and I had a particular dealing with Prime Minister Meles Zenawi of Ethiopia. So, and we became great friends actually with the Prime Minister, if I may say so. And, we were very much close in line with economic policy. And we think, Joe, in my view, actually, Joe and Meles designed the economic plan and one which set Ethiopia on a path of 15%, 10% per annum growth for 15 years.
Achha.
I went to New York with my brother was there, Anwar, Umar, my youngest brother, working for the UNDP. So I had lunch, we called up Joe, and Joe asked me to work for his think tank. He set up the Initiative of Policy Dialogue at the Columbia University. And then I started teaching at Columbia soon after I joined, and then as a professor, adjunct professor at Columbia. Sanjay Reddy was at Columbia again at the time, who also became a great friend. So did a whole lot of other people. Arjun Dayar, they would now head, which is the most interesting economic department, in my view, in India at the moment. The Azim Premji University in Bangalore, and I visited Bangalore often in recent years.
Your mother was from Bangalore, wasn't she?
No, she was from Hyderabad.
From Hyderabad, auntie. Yeah. Beautiful woman.
So, about the politics rather, I prefer to focus on the economy and the political economy of Pakistan. That's from a point of view of the economist. Now, the question is, the era of Rashid Uncle, not only was your father amazingly competent and well-read man, including he had economic training in economics at LSE, but he was therefore, and he was a banker. He ran the Industrial Development Bank of Pakistan as a very professional technocrat and a person of great integrity. Now, I imagine similarly, I didn't know personally the heads of PIDC and other state-run corporations or state financial institutions at the time, but I imagine they were very similar. And that was an era in which, remember, people like Mahbubul Haq, Sartaj Aziz, Khalid Ikram were in the Planning Commission of Pakistan. So that's partly why this question arises of what it would change since then. And why I have difficulty in answering the question that my old friend and dear friend, Hajun Chang, who is a Korean economist, was a professor at Cambridge University, often posed to me, whenever I see him, he can't resist asking me some variant of the question. It says, what happened to you guys in Pakistan? We learned from you. Koreans sent a mission to learn from you, and now you've fallen so far behind. And now you're even below many other countries now. So what happened? And then I try and think about it. And as I said, there was a period when you had saying people had technocratic staff was much better. And there tended to be people of integrity also, which is, I'm not saying that, I'm not making any comments on integrity or otherwise of people today. But, what I was trying to say, what I'm focusing on, is why was the economic performance of Pakistan so much better? From one of the best performing countries, certainly in South Asia, and one of the best performing countries of any developing country anywhere in the world, of all developing countries in the 60s and 70s, Pakistan was. And I think Pakistan did brilliantly in the 1950s on the economic front as well. That was partly by accident, not so much by design, but we can discuss that. But the creation of a whole class of capitalists during the 1950s that emerged in Pakistan, who later became entrepreneurs and set up industries and industrialists and exporters, manufactured exports. So the combined value of Pakistan's manufactured exports, say in 1965, exceeded the combined value of total exports of such Indonesia, Malaysia, Turkey, and I forget some other countries which I did a calculation. About 5 or 6 countries now, or Philippines I think was one of them, but I forget exactly which country. But amazing, each one of those countries now has much bigger manufactured exports than Pakistan did now. And then, what happened was there's another problem which is very rarely focused on, which is that the Ziaullah period was a real disaster for the Pakistan economy. That not only did the government get that time, Zia's government got a lot of money from the Afghan-related Pakistan war, for which Pakistan had to pay various prices in other ways. But it's also borrowing heavily in the domestic market at exceptionally high interest rates. So the real interest rate the government was paying was of the order of 5 to 8%, and nominal interest rate is like 15% of that, which is what we easily borrow on, which everyone was borrowing on, and a lot of my friends borrowed on that. I know, bought bonds or whatever they were called. I think they were called price bonds at the time. But anyway, the point is that the government accumulated vast amounts of debt during the Zia period to finance all kinds of expenditure, which then later on Pakistan government, when Zia fell, and I remember Benazir Bhutto's government, when it was formed, they immediately faced with a IMF program, very restrictive IMF program, and quite rightly so, because what IMF was trying to do was to get us off that debt trap of the domestically created by ourselves at very high interest rates, and that had posed enormous problems for the budget. So 60 to 70% of the revenues were going towards paying off interest rate past debts, mostly accumulated in the Zia era, and that was so what did you have to do? What do you do in that circumstance? You can't then just blame the IMF just shooting the messenger. But a lot of it was a message. I was at that time, just when I joined the Ministry of Finance, soon after that. And in fact, I remember that the Prime Minister Economic Committee, Advisory Committee, that then Nazir had appointed me to. I had access to some of the information in IMF document. And I looked and saw it, and I thought it was a really rough, really. Given that you're paying so much interest, and given that you have to have a significant defense expenditure, and so development expenditures are very small now, and they have shrunk in real terms. But on top of that, there's something else, which is the economic policy formulation. Now, I think one of the things that is often mistaken, people think it's corruption. But that's not corruption, it's not such an issue. I'm not saying it's not a moral issue. The moral and ethically is always wrong, corruption. But from an economic point of view, purely economic point of view, there's a difference. It's not necessarily, in the sense that you have enormous corruption in India, China, Bangladesh, and many other countries, Indonesia, not to mention the old Indonesia, also. Many of these countries have been sterling performers, top performers in the world in many respects. India has been, China, of course, phenomenal growth rate of 10% per annum for like 25, 30 years. And this was not because there is lack of corruption. So corruption is a bit of a non-issue from the point of view of what matters from the economic growth point of view are the incentives. Who gets the rent? Who gets to make the money? For what purpose? Whatever corruption there is, whatever you can distort the market in certain ways, you can create high protective system. So that problem is that you have very little vision of economic. And the government, partly because of the restrictions imposed by this program, stabilization program, but I guess the excuse would be a good reason to tell them because they did not have enough scope to think about development strategies. So they were so concerned with dealing with the financial crisis, which would be needed immediate attention concerning because you see, what I mentioned to you, I know the IMF intimately, and the point is when the governments have nothing to offer, you have a problem. And the governments have very little, when the governments have very little to offer, the IMF takes over. Obviously, someone has to formulate a stabilization program. But where the government has a clear development vision, and they can pursue persuasive about it. Like countries like Ethiopia, who get a lot of freedom to argue they argued their case. They said did not want to adopt these policies, but they for reasons that they didn't think they were successful. And what was they wanted to achieve? And they said what he wanted to achieve was to emulate the East Asian success. Now that was a very clear, coherent message from the government at all levels, at the highest level. Okay. Now, Pakistani government partly didn't have really the time to formulate those kind of strategies because they are dealing with macro crisis or whatever the reasons are. Point is that the government did not subsequently really have much of a vision or strategic vision. And what more, how to implement that vision. Because it's one thing to have a strategy, a general broad goal, then that you actually design detailed policies to bring that thing about.
But I always come away learning so much from you. I was in a hurry, and the most important question I wanted to have, we've discussed it before, but about corruption you had once explained to me. I really want that to be on record. But just explain to me the key points of your argument. It's so valuable. Thank you so much. Always so wonderful to be with you. Think of all our days when we were growing up. Fabulous.
Hi Marina, I'm sorry, I wanted to clarify something which maybe not causes a lot of confusion very often, which is the relationship between economic performance and corruption. Simply put, corruption is not an explanation of poor economic performance because you can have enormous corruption with rapid growth and economic transformation. indeed, China is a supreme example of, one might say, because it was growing the fastest growing economy in the world, structural transformation happening at a very rapid pace, and it became the factory of the world. At the same time, there was enormous corruption in China. Similarly, take the US, for example, at the frontier, technological frontier in many ways. And it is not that it's less corrupt. There's enormous corruption in the US. It's not as less corrupt than say, Europe, comparable countries, or Japan. I don't know that. It's hard to measure corruption, of course, but it's not an explanation of poor economic performance. What matters is the detailed design of policies, and what those policies are and how well they are implemented. So one of the things that has deteriorated in Pakistan is implementation and the quality of the technocrat. And, Rashid Uncle was a high-class technocrat, very competent and very well-versed in economics as well. He did his degree at LSE and did a very good degree at LSE. So, but that again, and people like Mahbubur Haq and Sartaj Aziz and Khalid Ikram were at the Planning Commission in Pakistan at that time, during that period when the Koreans learned from Pakistan. And so that is part of my answer to the question of my friend Hajun Chang, who poses to me often, what happened and how come you fell so far behind? So it's really the economic policies, what the incentives are, and how does one make money in a society, in an economy. And that is quite different from the degree of corruption. As I said, you can be enormously corrupt and grow rapidly and be at the technological frontier like the US is. So what is the explanation of poor economic management then in Pakistan? It's not corruption, it's something else. It is the policies implemented and how well they are implemented or badly they are implemented. That's what counts for economic performance. Thank you very much. I just wanted to clarify that point.